There we go. Go ahead, Katie.
Thanks, everyone. So we're going to just give it another minute here, as there's still a few people that are getting in on the waiting room. But welcome. Let's just give it one more minute here to see if there's any other participants and folks who are just getting off of other calls, and then we'll just get underway. Right, well, as folks are joining and other people are getting underlined, we might as well get started. Thank you everyone for joining this call. For some of you who may have been celebrating Easter, this may be a first day back call, so appreciate everyone being online. Today's call has a couple of two main focuses for our agenda. Thank you, Tara. The strategy update from the Global Fund work. So as we all know, the Global Fund has been engaged in what must feel like a very long process now, Hannah and Shanti, but there have been the partnership forums and the global opening and close. And so we wanted to come back to all of you with just an opportunity to get updates from the Secretariat, as well as the chair of the Strategy Committee, Rico Gustav, who's joined us, and then also updates from the communities and civil society delegations to the Global Fund Board. We then also wanted to share with you an outline, I guess, and just a concept for a toolkit that we'll be releasing in the coming days to a week. Tara's going to tell you more about that because I've lost track of timelines, having been off sick for the last week myself. And then we'll pivot to World Malaria Day, which is coming up at the in a couple of weeks towards the end of the month. Just let you know what some of our plans are, but then hear also from a number of you who are active and engaged in World Malaria Day planning and activities, and then open it up for any further updates. So that's the agenda for the call. If you do have something else that you'd like to raise, just flip Tara or I a message in the chat so that we can make sure to call on you towards the end of the call, but there's lots of opportunity for questions and comments throughout the call. So, so with that, I am going to turn it to Hannah Grant from the Global Fund Secretariat and Rico Gustav, the chair of the Strategy Committee, and just open to them for about the next 15 minutes to cover sort of what some of the outcomes from the partnership forums and the Strategy Committee meetings have been, and where things are, sort of likely to go next. So Hannah, maybe over to you first.
Thanks so much, Katie and Tara. And I'm just going to share my screen. Can everybody see the presentation? Okay, fab. So thank you so much for having Shanti, Rico and me to discuss strategy development with you. We really appreciate the GFAN group as a contributor and giving feedback on all of this. So thanks so much for having us again. So what we're going to do is give you an update on where things are with the process, give you some of the key overarching takeaways from the partnership forums, and then also get into a little bit about the zero draft strategy framework that was shared with the board, sorry, the strategy committee about 10 days ago. We'll give you some of their overarching feedback and discuss a bit about next steps. So just to start with the timeline, as Katie said, we've spent last year collecting a huge amount of input and evidence and informed strategy development from across the partnership, including the open consultation, which so many of you gave your input into. I think we've received the input of more than 5,000 individuals now from more than 100 countries, and we so appreciate it. And an updated synthesis of that is going to go on the website in the coming weeks. We have the feedback of the strategy committee and board of the fund, evidence from TUG, TRP, OIG, and etc. And all of that input was synthesized and used as background materials to inform the partnership forums. Now, Shanti's going to tell us a little bit more about the outcomes of the partnership forums, but as many of you will recall, these are a key milestone in the Global Fund life cycle every 6 years, where we bring together representatives from across the partnership to give their input and perspectives on what the Global Fund strategy should focus on. So with those partnership forum discussions finished already a couple of weeks ago, the strategy committee already had their first discussion on a zero draft framework, and that was basically a one kind of page summary of very, very draft kind of aims of the next Global Fund strategy. And that's going to be iterated on between the strategy committee and the board on a monthly basis between now and July, when it's approved by the board. And then we have through the end of the year for the development of the strategy narrative, which will add more flesh to the bones of that framework document. That will, of course, lead into the development of the KPIs and the M&E framework of the next strategy, policy updates, including allocation eligibility, and of course, be the basis for the 7th replenishment discussions and implementation. So just before we get to the partnership forum outcomes, just a brief recap, because I don't think we've discussed this together, the conclusions of some of the discussions that the strategy committee and the board had in the last quarter of last year around some kind of core areas of mandate for the next strategy. And the conclusion of these discussions, the board said that the Global Fund should maintain its mandate and focus as a primary mission on fighting the 3 diseases. On resilient and sustainable systems for health, the Global Fund should focus on supporting investments that deliver the 3 disease goals through integrated people-centered investments that also bring broader health benefits. And that in particular, amongst these, community system strengthening should play a broader role and be scaled up. On global health security and solidarity, the board guided that the Global Fund should continue to engage flexibly in COVID and the evolving discussions about the broader response, noting, of course, that Global Fund contributions through the 3 diseases and RSSH already contribute tremendously to pandemic preparedness and response, and that through the Global Fund's future engagement in this area, it should leave as an ambassador for an inclusive vision based on solidarity and equity. And also, of course, there were 2 kind of core themes throughout these discussions, which were unequivocal consensus of the need to strengthen community and civil society engagement and leadership of the response in the next strategy period, and to focus on equity, human rights, gender, and the most vulnerable. So with that, I will hand it over to Shanti to talk us through the partnership forums and their outcomes.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you so much for having us on the call today. So the partnership forum recommendations, before I talk through them, just to note that this is really the overarching high-level recommendations. And as many of you who participated know, is that the partnership forum has given rise to detailed recommendations to about 25 subtopics. And all that detailed input is already feeding into the strategy development process. So it has informed the zero draft of the strategy framework that has been discussed with the SC, and it will continue to inform the process. So this is not the full picture that we're highlighting here. We're working on detailed reports from the partnership forums, one overarching one from the opening and the closing and the summary of the 3 regional ones, and a detailed regional ones for each of the regions, which really goes into detail on the recommendations on each topic. And those will be available on the Global Fund website in May. So the overarching recommendations, directional, the key recommendations was for the Global Fund to maintain the focus on HIV, TB, and malaria, with contributions to RSSH through people-centered approaches, and to global health security and solidarity through a right-based approach, both aligned with Global Fund strength. The other recommendation was to place communities at the center of the next strategy, including ensuring an equal place at the table of civil society and communities at the table with governments in decision-making processes throughout the whole ground life cycle, and ensuring direct funding for community-led responses. The other one is redoubling efforts to address equity, human rights, gender, and other structural barriers, for example, through support for community-based key and vulnerable population and regional programs. Then the last directional overarching recommendations is to leverage the Global Fund position more to advocate for its core principles, including human rights, gender equality, as well as other Global Fund strengths. Then across domains, the first recommendation was strengthening the use of data for comprehensive decision-making, including strengthening community-led monitoring, strengthen sustainability and transition support, including supporting advocacy for sustained investment in key and vulnerable population programs post-transition, And then in ways of working, the first one was to support country ownership by articulating distinct and complementary roles for all key actors and ensuring mutual inclusion and accountabilities. Addressing in power balances on CCMs, strengthening partnerships, strengthening market shaping procurement and the uptake of innovations. And the last one, to increase secretariat flexibility to support countries to tailor programs to country context. And also in that framing, to address rigidity and increase risk appetite of the Secretariat to allow space for innovations and improve program quality. So this is a highlight of the 3 regional forums and the partnership forums overall. And of course, we'll share the final reports with you as soon as they're ready. Thank you. Back over to you, Hannah.
Thank you, Shanti. And actually, as Shanti was mentioning that, I realized also now on the Global Fund Strategy Development website is a recording from the global closing. So those of you who weren't able to participate, it's there for you to see how those discussions also were brought back together. So then, of course, now looking forward to the strategy framework, we as an organisation have been in existence for almost 20 years now with all these great lessons out. We've got some really core Global Fund strengths of our model, and it's looking forward to how we bring this all together to the 2030 horizon, including, of course, the need to especially make better progress against incidence reduction, for incidence reduction in order to achieve these goals. And in that vein, all of this input throughout 2020, the open consultation, the partnership forum recommendations, the board steer, was used to develop the zero draft strategy framework. And it also accounted for some key lessons from the implementation of the current strategy, one of those being the need to better prioritise the strategy so that it helps better focus the efforts of the partnership, and also to better articulate the roles, responsibilities and accountabilities of all actors in the partnership, to ensure that the work gets done, but also to address the imbalances, as Shanti mentioned, at a CCM level, to ensure that there's equal balanced decision making around the Global Fund grant life cycle. And then in synthesizing and putting together this framework, we try to distill what are the goals of the strategy be, so the what the partnership will focus on, the how, and then who is doing what. And that gave rise to this zero draft strategy framework that was discussed with the committee 10 days ago. So I'll give a brief run through it and how it brought things together, and then Rico, and then the delegations and the platforms, and we'll bring together all of the feedback that's been received on it and what will be used to develop the next iterations of it. So in terms of the goals of the zero draft strategy framework, the version that was put out for the strategy committee showed the primary goal, of course, being to end the 3 diseases, and then 4 contributory goals. 1 on maximising improvements in RSSH, 1 on maximising health equity and human rights, another on maximising pandemic preparedness and response, and another on increasing resources for health, both domestic and external. And that was accompanied by some key shifts that we'll go into and some partnership enablers on how we work. So, and I meant to say that we'll share these slides, so don't worry about all the small text, you'll be able to see them. For each of the goals, we used all the input today to try to illustrate the how. So on ending the 3 diseases, what would the key areas of focus be? And here we've spelled out, for example, the focus on incidence reduction, on addressing structural barriers to outcomes against the 3 diseases, and some core focus areas on each of the diseases. On maximising improvements in RSSH, you can see this integrated people-centred quality services are highlighted, scaling up community systems and responses, increased and better quality data, including use of CLM. On health, equity and human rights, taking into account equity considerations across the grant life cycle, prioritising outcomes for key and vulnerable populations, and advancing human rights, addressing human rights and gender-related barriers across the Global Fund portfolio, and incentivising government action on that too. And then some core areas of leveraging the Global Fund model on pandemic preparedness and response in the corner there. And on mobilising increased resources for health, focusing on how we can be catalytic at domestic level, enhancing value for money, so more health for the money, and strengthening health financing systems to this end. And then we put in also among the how, we synthesized some of the key shifts that we saw through the input. So at a strategic level, for example, the need to adapt to climate and environmentally sensitive approaches, to encourage innovation through the work. For example, at an operational level, to scale up community-led programming and monitoring. As Shanti also mentioned, one of the key areas of input through the partnership forums was the need to better leverage our model and the funds that go into countries in order to advocate for Global Fund core priorities and principles, to address power imbalances on CCMs and to scale up innovations. And then on partnership enablers, we've spelled out the Global Fund model and how it works, and then what the key players are in that partnership. And the idea is that this would be built out with specifying the roles and responsibilities in a narrative. So I'll leave this there. When we discussed this with the strategy committee 10 days ago, the key areas of feedback were on a few areas, and Rico and others will give more. The primary one, and the main one, was that pandemic preparedness and response should not be at the same level in terms of aims as maximizing improvements in RSSH and human health, equity and human rights. So it should be there, but at a lower level. The other core one was that the input to date and the key need to put communities at the center of the next strategy hasn't been accurately and appropriately reflected. So these are the two of the core areas that will be focused on in the next iteration of the strategy framework that is being worked on at the moment in advance of a board call in about 2 weeks' time. So I'll hand over to Rico, and then I meant to say earlier, a little bit further on in the process, what we'll also do is put a version of the framework up, probably at the end of May, up on the strategy development website, and then be able to invite everybody's input as well then. So over to Rico and to the delegations and platforms too.
Hi, everybody. Thanks, Hannah and Shanti, for covering on all those points. And hi again to everybody. I think I'll just cover a couple of points that has been discussed in the SC meetings, and also just to also note that we received the key points from the joint statements of the civil society and communities as well. And I think there are a couple of points there that are quite important to be taken into account as well. I mean, in particular, well, in general, there's the support for the zero draft is not there. Let's just say it that way. I think from the civil society and from the communities as well, there's a strong rejection there on the zero draft, especially around the pandemic preparedness. And there's a recommendation for the pandemic preparedness, as Hannah mentioned, to be set lower than what it is right now in the zero draft. And there are a couple of other strategy committee members as well that raised that point quite strongly. In fact, almost all actually raised that point, except for 1 or 2 constituencies that are sitting in the SC. And also from the statement, we understand that the civil society and the communities delegation do not support the 2 options for the missions as well. The couple of other strategy committee members also feel the same, but wanted to actually go back to the mission later on, as it represents the sort of a culmination of the overall strategy framework, which is still needed to be discussed. So, there's a request there to come back again to the mission and vision in the end of the conversation as well. And I think there's you guys also pointed out that there are certain words there that lack of clarity in terms of words safer, for example, in the vision and mission as well. So noted around that. And I think one thing that has been pointed out by your statement is also around the role of Global Fund in pushing for the global health solidarity, and how we can actually embed that into the strategy. I think there's a point also around the funding model, and how funding for the key populations and for civil society and communities, expanding regional and multi-country grants, that's also strongly reflected in your statement. And just, I'll just go through like a couple of things that Hannah already went through actually, around the repositioning the pandemic preparedness. I think the suggestion now is to downgrade it or somehow make it more of a cross-cutting results of all of these different goals as well. So at the moment, the Secretariat is also working on based on that input, because that has been reiterated over and over again by some of the strategy committee members, but also by non-members as well. I think there's a consensus around human rights, gender, and communities, and RSSH as well, but we haven't been able to articulate how. So we have sort of articulated the what in the strategy, but the how itself, it's not reflected quite clearly, especially around how we can actually truly leverage around from the benefits of the community engagement and community leadership in particular. I think there's a call around how we can actually further emphasize Global Fund's role in the within the SDG and articulates our contribution towards the global health architecture. Yeah, I think that those are some of the key points, and Hannah already covered also the rest. It's just personal reflections from my side in terms of what still needs to be discussed, what needs to be re-emphasized, and what are the other things that we actually need to make sure that the discussion around strategy is progressing. I think first of all is that there hasn't been any, well, there are some concrete and specific directions from the strategy committee members and the non-members as well, but we need more. And let me just give you an example around community leadership, around community engagement, around human rights. And I think this is something that we have been discussing also within the communities delegation and the civil society as well. It's really easy to actually put it as a principle. It's really easy to put put it as a marketing to attract donors and others. But we really need to articulate the concrete role and the concrete contributions of Global Fund towards promoting human rights and respecting human rights. What is actually the concrete examples that we want the Global Fund to do? That demand needs to be articulated further, but not only on human rights, on any other topic, on RSSH, on global health security, for example, which is still really unclear for me in particular, around what is actually the role of the Global Fund there, and what is the directions that we, the directions from the strategy committee members and the non-members as well. I think second thing that I'd like to point out that will require further conversation is obviously around Global Fund's role in access to medicines. And this is actually has been captured within the draft framework. If you can see that there's under RSSH, there's something there, or under HSS. But as we know, like, we need a stronger guidance here from the strategy committee members and also other advocates in terms of how Global Fund can actually further leverage on its purchasing power to make sure that medicines remain, medicines becomes affordable and accessible as well. So I think further guidance there around access to medicine, around innovations is also needed. And just want to cover the third point. We have heard quite a lot about around civil society engagement or community engagement and community leadership. And surprisingly, I only heard about key populations and focus on key populations only once from one constituencies, not from donor constituencies. Just want to sort of trigger a discussion in terms of how we can better articulate Global Fund's role in terms of improving the lives of the key populations on TB, and well, TB does not have a defined key population, but on key population on HIV, and what is the role of Global Fund on the issues surrounding the key populations as well. So, for example, when we talk about criminalization, what is the Global Fund's role? Because that is directly impacting the work of the Global Fund, right? And probably the last one is around, this is an advice. We really need to think about how this strategy will lead into other discussions as well, such as eligibility and allocations, such as KPIs. But primarily, well, basically it's going to lead into discussions about everything. We need to questions on whether we have the right STC policies, for example, for this strategy, and just reflecting the impact of COVID. And I think while the demand, I think in the partnership forum, in ECA and in LAC, for example, the demand for better policy, for the Global Fund to actually pay attention more in terms of sustainability and transition has been spelled out, but there hasn't been any clear way forward here in terms of how the Global Fund can better invest on countries that are transitioning out. I think primarily it's because of the complexities of the issues and because the Global Fund is not the only partner that's supposed to be responding to that. But I just want to point out that particular issues because it will lead into a problem if, for example, the discussion around eligibility and allocation does not go as well as the civil society and communities wants it to go. So just want to point that out and make sure that there's an attention also to what's happening after the strategy. So thank you.
Thanks, Rico. I think that's really helpful to get your input and your thoughts on that. I just want
to encourage people to ask the tough questions because it's Hannah who's going to answer that, not me.
Nice, classy. Thanks, Rico. Yeah, and as you can all see, there are already a couple of questions that are in the chat, which include, an important question around how to share back more information with the Secretariat, with you. But I did want to give an opportunity to our colleagues from delegations who were at the strategy committee meetings to pop in and add anything to this. I just note that we're already a little bit over time in terms of where we hope to be in this call. This is such an important conversation that we're glad that there's lots of people on the call and engaging and already asking questions. So I did just want to pass it over to Andre first from Developing Country NGO Delegation. And then I guess Robin, if we've fixed audio, and someone from communities, and I'm not clear if that's still Olivia who's on the call today for that. Andre?
Okay, I can do this. I have from time to time background noise, but hopefully that's okay, not so loud. Thank you, Rico. Really, you summarized not only the C discussion, but also very key, the most essential part of the joint communities and civil society position paper on the strategy. As you rightly said, so there were some concerns. So these three delegations, including mine, Developing Country NGO delegation, were not really in support of the zero draft strategy framework. The key thing that actually we feel some disconnect between the partnership forum discussion, which we all had, with a very strong emphasis on the human rights, gender, key populations, and even in some summary slides, kind of there were points on doubling efforts on boosting the response on how elements, and in the zero draft strategy framework, we saw rather continuation of the previous discussion with no really, sorry for the noise, with no really dramatic change. We expected that partnership forum would really lead to major changes of the draft or to the development of the draft strategy framework. But we saw, as actually Rico mentioned, that overarching principles are there, but they were not cascading, and we see this as a big risk for the strategy, because if principles are not elaborated really and really integrated into the strategy, they will remain as just overarching principle. So for the sake of time, I would not go through each point perhaps, but just to highlight that we see really the need that new strategy will be grounded on the principles of human rights, equity, inclusivity, solidarity, gender equality, and people-centered approach. And we really would like to see, even in this strategy, how it will translate into the how, not just sticking to the principles. Yeah, perhaps I'll stop here, not digging into details, but also highlighting that we, yeah, we are happy also to continue this discussion and to bring more feedback. Also, our member, Dr. Caroline Gomes, she is also strategy committee member, so we can keep this discussion both at the strategy committee level and at the board level as well.
Thanks, Andre. I'm just going to pass it over quickly to Bruna and just ask in terms of questions Bruna from Communities Delegation. And just in terms of some of the questions, some of what's being asked in the chat is very sort of specific questions around potential, maybe this is something that hasn't been done yet in terms of thinking about sort of assessing where the areas of disagreement or where some of the dissonance still is. And then also what the opportunities are for providing feedback and who best to provide feedback. And to some extent, and I'm not sure who put that in the chat, to some extent, we hope to address that through GFAN's toolkit that we'll talk about a little bit at the end of this. But Bruna, I wanted to pass it to you quickly, and then to Robin from the Developed Country NGO delegation, and back to Hannah and company for quick responses. But we need to wrap this part up in the next sort of 8 minutes so that we can give attention to the other items on the call. Sorry, everyone. Bruna.
Okay, thank you so much, Katie. Thanks everyone, and greetings from snowy Netherlands today. I'll be very brief now as required. We agree with everything, of course, that Rico, that Andre have sort of captured, and Hannah as well with came out from the partnership forums. We see there is a little bit of disconnect as we would have hoped for. That would be in the draft 0. But just we have 3 or 4 points that we just want to make sure that they're clear where our delegation stands. And first one is a separate funding stream for communities. That's something that we have been advocating for a long time. And the dual track financing has not only not improved so much access for communities, but in some cases even hindered the access for communities and key people populations. And that's a strong ask that our delegation really wants to see reflected there. Also, in terms of our SSH investments, we do agree, but as long as it's not only infrastructure and that it looks holistically at people and include community systems in our SSH. So we have in our previous statement put a definition of what we want to see as our SSH defined in the strategy. So we're hoping to have that taken on board as well. In terms of the whole strategy, yes, is that we believe that it has to be overall people-centered, addressing CRG issues, and ensuring that communities again are directly funded and be able to do their job. And finally, there isn't a specific need that we haven't touched upon and that we're worried for supporting advocacy for community-led monitoring. So that's also a strong ask that our delegation has and wanted to come here today. Just a more broad point is that there's a lot of talk around how COVID has taught us many lessons, but indeed, we just want to reiterate that COVID has only put them to the surface again. It has not taught us anything new that we didn't know before. It's just that communities and key populations do play a central role in the 3 disease responses, and that should be reflected and appropriately supported in the next Global Fund strategy. That's it, thanks.
Thanks, Bruna. Robin from Developed. I don't know that we've fixed the microphone problems that we've had earlier on the call, Robin. We cannot hear you if you're trying to speak. No, but it sounds like a buzzing bee to me.
Robin was thinking of something.
Yeah, it's like, sorry, Robin. I don't know that we're going to be able to get to you on this call because we just can't seem to hear your voice. So our apologies. for that, if that's on our end. What I would suggest is I'd like to flip it back to first Rico and then Hannah to maybe address some of the questions. There's a couple of specific questions around gender and how that may or may not be included in some of the Zero framework. So hopefully between you can address that. But Rico, maybe pass it back to you and you can leave all the hard stuff for Hannah, as you already said you would.
I was going to suggest the other ways, but he gets the easy one.
Yeah, I think it's probably better for Hannah to actually respond before I responded my way, and it's not consistent. Go ahead, Hannah.
No, it's fine. He can pull me up on all the things I get wrong. So I think there's 3 points coming out of the chat. One of them was about gender, and so gender was not purposely left out of the framework. What we were wondering in the equity and human rights framing is whether gender is both within equity and within human rights, and if that was sufficient that it was within that and that we articulate that within the objectives. Interestingly, the strategy committee, I think there was only one delegation that suggested that gender more specifically be brought out, but that's definitely something we're looking into in the next version. On government and community, were there any differences in input? Rico, please build on this. I don't think it was so much there were differences in recommendations, but I think what a lot of this is trying to get out this tension, especially that manifests itself at the CCM level, that in decision making at country level, there is not balanced decision making in many contexts between communities and government, and the need to better articulate the expectations there as a basis for then ensuring this happens in a balanced way going forward. And then just there was a point on prevention. Would there be a bigger focus on prevention going forward? I think when we look towards a 2030 horizon and we look at the data, we are off track the most on incidence reduction across all 3 diseases. So a step change is needed there. We need to do things differently and better and together with communities more systematically, and that's what the focus would be. So Rico, you can correct everything that I've done wrong.
No, so thanks for that. And what Hannah mentioned is true. I think for me, one of the most difficult aspect here to be addressed in the strategy development process, and this is very, very global fun, I think, because this is where all the different process is actually sort of clash, because there's a way here where we can organize the strategy. Sorry, we can structure the strategy around words, or around content, or around and in terms of around content, it's also like what programming content or more of a broader advocacy content. And I'll just give an example, we have to remember as well, and I think this is we also have to remember that we're going to use the strategy also to indicate to donors what can be invested on within the global fund, which it's another way of me saying that it's also there's a replenishment here that we need to think about. So there's always a push and pull around how we can use the strategy to make sure that we better articulate what we do and better drive changes on the ground, but also how we can actually use the strategy to market and sell the global fund as well. And sometimes these things are clashing, and it's really depending on the board in terms of indicating where they want the strategy to go to. I'll give you an example, and this is again my personal analysis around the pandemic preparedness and RSSH in particular, because when we talk about pandemic preparedness, most of the activities, the concrete activities within the pandemic preparedness is actually under RSSH as well. But somewhat, we need to mention that word as an umbrella or as a cross-cutting effect as well. So just want to give you an example in terms of how then it can complicate the discussions as well. But I think one of the things that also we need to pay attention to is around the structure of the strategy itself, because it changed. And I was involved in the previous strategy development as well. The introduction of the strategic shift is also something that is very new, and it's something that we're trying and we want to see, because from my perspective, that is actually the how. So the contributory goals and the goals, vision, and mission, those are the what, and the strategic shifts is actually the how. Whether or not we have the right level of how, that's also another discussions that we need to have. And I just want to again reiterate around the discussion around human rights, because it's we really need to make sure that first of all we put the principles at the right places within the strategy, but also that the wording around that and the way that we frame it is actually going to provide guidance on concrete activities of how the Global Fund can actually support to promote and respect human rights on the ground. This is also, for the CRG compensation as well. So I just want to stop there because I know that the time is running out. Back to you, Katie.
Thanks so much. I think if we could just get one last sort of, and this I would open to anyone from the delegations or from the CRG platforms who are online, but what some of the best ways to share both those concrete examples that people may have around these core sort of asks that are coming and around this zero draft, as you've articulated it, Hannah. But what are some of the ways to get more feedback into all of you as you guys are discussing over the next little while? There's a board meeting next month. There's undoubtedly many strategy committee meetings happening too over the next couple months. What are some of the best ways to do that? And you can advise us as well here at GFAN, because we can always include that in our toolkit, so that we can give people an idea of dates and timing and the types of and the people that they should be reaching out to. Rico, did you have a thought?
Can I respond to that first? I think I just want to point out that from now until May, we're going to develop the strategic framework as well. From now until May, strategic framework. But from May until October, we're going to develop the narrative. And I hope that people do not underestimate the importance of the narrative as well, because it provides the context of what we're saying in the framework, and it will provide more clarity. So please also make sure that you provide input through the narrative development as well. And I think in terms of the best input, for us right now, it's much more strategic if you provide the input through the strategy committee members, because they will be voting on the draft framework, and if they feel that it's not being followed, then their directions are not being followed, then it will be voted against. So the first one is strategy committee members, but we also trying to make it a habit for strategy committee to read the points that the non-strategy committee members make, especially around strategy, because we have to get a buy-in from the broader board since the beginning. So we're going to make that. But the Secretariat has been looking at the statements made by external organizations as well. So organizations that are not part of the board, for example, or not part of the not technical partners, they also read that, and they take that into account as well. And Hannah, maybe as a last word, you can confirm that, or yeah.
Fully confirm. And then only to add that when the framework is slightly more evolved, probably later next month, we'll put a version of it on the website and let you know, so you can use that as a basis for giving input.
That's really helpful. And Tara, I'll just pass it back to you to talk a little bit about the toolkit and how we haven't released it yet because we wanted to have this call so we can take some of this insight in terms of who some of the targets need to be and some of the timelines. So, but Tara, back over to you around the toolkit that's in development.
Hi, everyone. I popped this up before I started talking just to kind of speed things up. So I'm hoping that you've had a little bit of a look while folks were talking about the toolkit. But essentially, we hope to have a key messages document about 2 pages that you'll be able to use to share with folks when you're advocating, and to accompany a template letter that you can send to board constituencies and to government leads on global fund policy. These materials we're still working on the exact messaging, and we're consulting with again off on this call, but also with the two civil society delegations and the communities delegations to try to kind of get our wording just right. And we're also opening that up to the CRG platforms just to make sure that we have the wording just right. So we're just trying to get through that little bit there. And we'll also have some social media tools and a Zoom photo, which you may have noticed I had posted up early just to demonstrate our Zoom photo. So when you're not speaking, you can put this in place of your photo to kind of be a little bit of a statement during your when you're on a call with regarding the Global Fund strategy or with the Global Fund members. It's just something to kind of make a little bit of a statement. You can see some of the other tools that we'll have. This is for our social media tools coming up. And again, this is all draft. We haven't quite finalized everything yet, but I tried to pull some stuff together just so we have something to talk about. I'm now going to rapidly shift gears to World Malaria Day. And initially I was going to share our plan first, but I feel that we should make sure that we have some lovely people who have taken time out of their day to come talk about their World Malaria Day plans. And I want to make sure we don't run out of time for them. So what I'm going to do is shift things and put ours at the end of this call. So if we have to go over, you might just miss a little bit of our presentation. And yes, thank you to everyone who did join this call from the Global Fund and Rico and Bruna and everyone for coming out, Hannah, to do this call. I really appreciate it. And sorry for this quick changeover. It's kind of abrupt, but without further ado, I just want to pop this over to our friends at Olivia from Impact Santé Afrique and CS4 me, if you want to jump on and just say a few words about what you're working on for World Malaria Day, I would really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you very much, everyone, and thank you, Rico and others, for the great overview of the strategy. So quickly, for World Malaria Day, with the Global Network for Civil Society Organization for Malaria Elimination, we are organizing on Tuesday, April 20th, 1 p.m. GMT, a Global Malaria Civil Society Conference. The theme is Zero Malaria, Draw the Line Against Malaria, increase community engagement, and ensure timely mobilization of malaria co-funding requirement of Global Fund grants. So we will have WHO, civil society organizations, member of our network, the Global Fund CRG platform for Francophone Africa. We'll have community champions, and we are also going to have ALMA and other partners, including GFAN Africa. Rosemary, thank you very much for your time. So we look forward to this big conference where we're going to have discussions on the fight against malaria and also priorities that needs to be done, especially in this context of COVID-19, making sure that malaria, the malaria fight continue to be on the front line of the agenda of our leaders. And other than that, we will organize a series of events from our members. So we will send you by email all the information about different events of our members online, especially from Asia Pacific and also Africa. And we look forward to have you all. And also we'll have a declaration, a CS4Me declaration, as we do each year, to talk about what we want to prioritize for the fight against malaria. So thank you very much, and we look forward to this World Malaria Day and continue to engage malaria CSOs in the Global Fund strategy. Thank you.
Thank you, Olivia, so much for taking the time to be on the call. I really appreciate it. I'm next going to turn it over to Maria from RBM.
Thanks, Sarah. Can I just please share my screen? Thank you. Great, so I hope everybody can see my screen now. So Olivia, as you just mentioned, the theme for this year's World Malaria Day will be Zero Malaria, Draw the Line Against Malaria. For those of you who don't know, World Malaria Day will take place on the 25th of April, as it does every year. So this year, the theme will unify and build on the two recent campaigns. Zero Malaria Starts With Me, you all know probably about it, the movement, the Pan-African movement co-led by the RBM Partnership and the African Union Commission, and the Draw the Line Against Malaria Youth Focus campaign. So this theme will explore and connect both malaria elimination and malaria in high burden settings. And the objectives for this year's World Malaria Day will be to highlight the successes in the malaria fight since the year 2000 and inspire the new E2025 countries identified by WHO that have the potential to eliminate the disease by 2025. So with both, we will demonstrate that malaria is within, zero malaria is within reach for all countries. To amplify this theme, together with the World Health Organization, the RBM Partnership to End Malaria will host a virtual forum on malaria elimination. We will hear from representatives from countries, from community health leaders, community champions about how to reach zero malaria. So we'll both hear from countries that have already reached zero and those who are close to elimination, but also from high burden countries, and we will hear how we can reach the target. I've put here on the slide the link to register to the event. Since World Malaria Day will be on a weekend, the event will take place on 21st April. I will also pop the link to register on the chat. I'm not sure if people here on the call have received our toolkit, but if not, I'm happy to share it after the call with the secretariat at GFAN, and then maybe you can share with the broader group. We shared a toolkit for World Malaria Day on 1st of April, as we launched a social media countdown, also on the theme of counting down to zero malaria. So every day from 1st of April to the 25th, we are highlighting on our social media channels all the various countries that have achieved zero malaria in the past years. We started with the first one, UAE, on the 1st of April, and we will culminate the social media countdown with the latest, El Salvador, which was announced just earlier last month. Another activation we're working on is a virtual relay for World Malaria Day. So at 21 hours local time on 25th April, countries around the world will be invited to light up some landmarks or project the giant zero malaria logos onto some iconic buildings to celebrate World Malaria Day. We will of course take pictures of all of them and then amplify them on social media. Our colleagues at Malaria No More UK are working also with some amazing creative partners on a new animation as part of the Draw the Line Against Malaria campaign. And you can find all the information on zeromalaria.org. Then to close here, I've added this slide on how to get involved for World Malaria Day. So we have all the information on our World Malaria Day page on our website. The link is just here, endmalaria.org/World Malaria Day 2021. Here there are different ways how you can join us on World Malaria Day. First of all is joining our countdown on social media. The assets are all on our website, so feel free to download them and start sharing them on your platforms. Again, an invite for everybody who wish to do so to attend the virtual forum on the 21st of April. The link is here. If you know about any, owners of some great landmarks in your countries, please feel free to reach out to us. We would love for them to light up for World Malaria Day on the 25th of April. And of course, we welcome all amplification on social media ahead of World Malaria Day, on World Malaria Day and beyond. Thank you all, and thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Maria. I will be sharing our World Malaria Day tools and including yours when we send it all out later today. So the link to your campaign stuff will all be in with our stuff, and it's already up on our website. So
thanks, Sarah.
No problem. I'm just going to share my screen again. No, I'm not. Angela from GFAN Africa, are you able to say a couple of words about what GFAN Africa is up to for World Malaria Day, please?
Yes, sure, Tara. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Just to mention quickly our activities for World Malaria Day. We will have an online show during the week of the 25th of April. The show will speak on malaria in Africa, We haven't set a date, but it's gonna be live on YouTube, on Facebook, on Twitter. Conversations on malaria and malaria elimination. And then we will have draft newspaper article. How we do is that we write a generic article and we share with our partners across Africa, and they tweak it to suit the context of their country, and then they publish it in their own countries. We will also join on social media work, on Twitter especially, and we're happy to borrow content from GFAN and from RBM, so that we synchronize the messaging and share that on Twitter. And finally, like Olivia mentioned, my colleague Rosemary will join in the CS for Me activity, and she has a speaking role on mobilizing counterpart resources from the Global Fund for malaria grant for 2021 to 2023 cycle. So that's it from our end, Tara. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Angela. Okay, I'm going to kind of just share our World Malaria Day plans featuring some of our speakers. If we go a little bit over, I hope that's okay, but if you have to drop off the call, I completely understand. I'm sorry for, it's very hard to judge how long things will take, and now I've learned to always put my stuff first to make sure we get it all in. But so without further ado, you can find a link to our World Malaria Day campaign on the slide here, but we will be I'll be sending it around later today with again with RBM stuff and any other links. So if you have World Malaria Day plans that you would like to share over GFAN, I will update the website and add them, or I can also share them with all of you over our GFAN, or you can share yourself. That is also very much welcome. So like World TB Day, we'll be launching new content each week of April, starting this week. And you're encouraged to share, but our request again is that you share it the same week. So we have one each week. So we ask that you don't like put all of them out the same week. So gradually share them out. And on the final week, we will also be sharing a short video that we hope that you will also share with you. In addition to the World Malaria Day hashtags from RBM, we've added a Unite to Fight and World Malaria Day as part of our campaign hashtags. And so we will be featuring this week, we will be featuring Miriam, and you can, on our website, you'll be able to find some sample wording that you can use, and also how to tag our speakers. So the first week will be Miriam, and then we will have Miranda and Crystal. So that is our kind of really fast, quick and dirty toolkit. And so sorry for kind of condensing everything down, and thank you, Katie, for popping that into the chat there, the link. I was going to open up if anyone had any questions on World Malaria Day materials, but I don't think we really have time. But feel free to reach out if you have questions. And even if you have questions about RBM's campaign, feel free to send me an email, and I can always pass them along and get that information to you. And the only other thing I wanted to make sure that we covered is that keep an eye out for our next GFAN call, which will be following the board meeting in May, as far as I know, although we may throw in another GFAN meeting in there, who knows. But the next one that we have kind of on the schedule is following the board meeting, and I'm hoping to be sending that out, the invitation for that, hopefully this week. So I don't have anything more, so I want to say thank you to everyone who presented on the call today, and appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedules. And I see that we are at the hour, so we have just made it. So I appreciate everyone coming on the call. And Katie, I don't know if you had anything else you wanted to add.
No, just to say thank you to everybody for being on the call, and undoubtedly there are more conversations that we need around the Global Fund strategy, so stay tuned for those as well.
All right, thank you, everyone. And the only thing I don't think I mentioned was that our toolkit for the strategy is likely to come out this week, probably end of this week around Thursday, but there's a chance it might not come out until Monday. So we'll see how it goes and all of that. So thank you, everyone, and have a lovely rest of your day.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye.